Number 7. Susan Mize. In February of 2018, a Texas teenager was accused of orchestrating the armed robbery of one of her friends. 17-year-old Susan Mize reportedly offered Preston Barry $150 in exchange for him giving 2 of her acquaintances a ride to Houston. Mize's proposition was a ruse designed to lure Barry into an armed carjacking and kidnapping perpetrated by 2 co-conspirators. On the night of the incident, Barry was ambushed in his car by a pair of teenage suspects that were secretly working alongside Mize, who pretended to be an unsuspecting victim throughout the attack. Barry was ordered into the back seat by a 15-year-old male wielding a firearm. The other suspect, a 16-year-old male, brandished a knife as Barry joined him in the back. He was then restrained with Mize's shoelaces, and the 2 robbers allegedly struck him several times, repeatedly threatening him with their weapons. The suspects then drove to an ATM where they forced Barry to withdraw an unspecified sum of money. After obtaining the cash, the teens drove Mize back to her home in Montgomery County and dropped her off. Once he was alone with the armed perpetrators, Barry revealed that he had more money at his parents' home. When the robbers took him there, however, Barry managed to escape their capture and subsequently locked them out of the house. The victim's family contacted local authorities, who tracked down the stolen vehicle at Dennis Johnson Park. A short while later, warrants were issued for the 2 male suspects' arrests, while Mize was brought in for questioning by the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. During her interview with investigators, Mize ultimately confessed to planning the armed robbery herself and to recruiting the 2 teenage boys who carried it out. She was charged with felony aggravated robbery and was booked into the Montgomery County Jail. Number 6. Molly Elizabeth Peter and Larry DeAndre Ratliff Jr. A teenager was arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison for her role in a drug deal gone wrong on April the 11th of 2017. 18-year-old Molly Elizabeth Peter, a resident of Des Moines, Iowa, allegedly served as the getaway driver during an armed robbery at a parking lot in Beaverdale. The young woman was an accomplice to Larry DeAndre Ratliff Jr., age 26. The latter was carrying out a prearranged narcotics transaction with Antonio Eugene Quinn and Michael Allen James Jr. when gunfire broke out. The drug deal had turned into a robbery during the course of which Ratliff shot Quinn in the chest and James in the arm. Des Moines police were notified of the shooting at about 9:20 p.m. and the wounded pair were transported to a nearby hospital. James was discharged the following day, but Quinn ultimately succumbed to his injuries. Investigators swiftly identified Ratliff as the perpetrator of the fatal shooting, and he was consequently charged with the murder and attempted murder of the 2 victims. He was sentenced to life in prison, while his accomplice, Peter, also faced criminal charges in connection to the deadly incident. Her 25-year prison term was decided following convictions on charges of first-degree murder, attempted murder and first-degree robbery. Peter had held jobs at various fast food restaurants prior to her imprisonment, and her Facebook profile indicated that she was engaged to be married. Number 5. The Duct Tape Bandit. In August of 2007, a liquor store in Kentucky was robbed by a man who'd wrapped silver duct tape around his head in an effort to conceal his identity. The suspect's crude disguise led to him being dubbed the Duct Tape Bandit by several media outlets. The 24-year-old robber, whose real name was Casey Casey, carried out the high-profile heist at Shamrock Liquors in the city of Ashland. The store's manager reportedly spotted Casey attempting to steal $15 worth of rolled coins and proceeded to chase the masked man out into the parking lot. Casey was then tackled to the ground by another store employee who held him down until the arrival of law enforcement. Police officers were forced to meticulously peel each layer of duct tape off the suspect's face so as to identify him. In a television interview that subsequently went viral, Casey maintained his innocence and vehemently denied being the duct tape bandit. Nevertheless, he was ultimately charged with first-degree robbery and sent to prison for the crime. In April of 2015, Casey admitted guilt in an entirely unrelated case involving the mugging of an Ashland businessman in an alleyway. Casey committed this particular offense while out on parole and was arrested once more, resulting in a sentence of 12 years behind bars on a second robbery conviction. Number 4. Kendall Reynolds and Tywana Antoinette Cody. A 21-year-old woman was killed by rounds fired from her own gun while attempting to rob two men in central Georgia on October the 10th of 2021. Kendall Reynolds and Tywana Antoinette Cody, aged 42, had met up with a pair of men during the evening hours of October the 9th. Later on in the night, as the four individuals rode together in a vehicle in Warner Robins, Reynolds allegedly brandished a firearm in an attempt to rob the male passengers. An altercation ensued in which one of the men reached for the gun in an effort to disarm Reynolds. During the struggle, the weapon was discharged, and in an ironic twist of fate, Reynolds herself was struck. Local authorities responded to a report of shots fired just before 1 a.m. Following the arrival of emergency personnel, Reynolds was transported to Houston Medical Center, where she would ultimately pass away from her injuries. Warner Robins police later determined that Cody had acted as Reynolds' accomplice, and she was charged with various offenses in connection to the armed robbery itself, as well as the death of her criminal associate. Number 3. Robert C. Williams. In February of 2014, a Maryland man was arrested following a failed robbery at a PNC bank in Laurel. Law enforcement officers pursued the perpetrator, later identified as Robert C. Williams, all the way to a Columbia neighborhood after he'd fled with approximately $20,000 in cash. The robbery was fraught with a number of crucial mistakes which gradually unfolded. At the onset of Williams' escape attempt, after entering the bank and implying he was armed, he demanded money from one of the tellers on duty before trying to make his way out of the building with bundles of stacked bills in his arms. The PNC surveillance cameras captured Williams dropping the stolen cash all over the floor of the bank. He then frantically attempted to shovel the money back into his pockets and even placed some of the scattered bills inside of an upturned umbrella positioned nearby. After collecting as much money as he could, Williams rushed to the green minivan he'd parked outside. As he drove away from the scene, the robber unwittingly passed directly over a set of spike strips that had been set up by Howard County Police. He led officers on a 15-mile chase with a vehicle hampered by a pair of flat tires. He was eventually forced to stop while traveling on Route 29, exit the disabled car, and flee on foot. In what would be his final slip-up, Williams lost his balance on a patch of ice and was finally corralled by the officers in pursuit, who found a backpack containing the stolen cash in his possession. Today's topic was requested by Brandon Camon, Phone Nem Keon, Felicia Jolly, and Michael Ivy. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. The Cardiff ATM robbery. A 77-year-old pensioner successfully defended himself from an armed robber who'd accosted him as he was attempting to withdraw money from an ATM in Wales. The elderly victim was Trevor Weston, a retired Cardiff bus driver who'd made an early morning stop at a Sainsbury's supermarket on February the 17th of 2020 in order to take out cash to pay for the daily newspaper. After placing the money he'd withdrawn into his wallet, the grandfather of 3 was approached from behind by a masked man who was wearing a black baseball hat and a reflective safety jacket. The suspect, later identified as Michael Leonard Collins, aged 40, pinned Weston against a garbage bin and demanded the man's wallet. He allegedly threatened to stab the elderly victim if he failed to comply with his commands. Weston fought back against his assailant, landing a couple of punches near Collins' neck, prompting the would-be robber to flee the scene empty-handed. The footage, pulled from the store surveillance cameras, went viral after news of the incident had begun circulating internationally. The mugger eventually pleaded guilty to the charges levied against him in connection to the attempted robbery. Speaking after the incident, Weston recounted that he'd previously suffered a broken right shoulder in a fall at home, which forced him to use his left arm, the weaker of the two, as he struck his attacker. He also claimed to have never been in a fight prior to his run-in with Collins. Number 1. The Theodore home invasion. A 62-year-old military veteran successfully fought off 3 would-be robbers during a violent home invasion in June of 2017. Michael Irvin of Theodore, Alabama, had already been robbed a couple of weeks prior to the incident in question. The 3 suspects had stolen the former Marine's cancer medication and had also threatened to return to the man's home if he reported the theft to the police. Irvin was unfazed by their attempts to intimidate him, and he promptly notified the authorities of the robbery. On the evening of June the 22nd, Irvin heard a knock at his front door. Upon opening it, he was immediately met with a shotgun blast from point-blank range. Irving had, however, installed a plexiglass doorframe following his first encounter with the robbers. The thick frame managed to slow down the momentum of the buckshot enough to save the homeowner's life and allow him to retreat to the kitchen. Irving then grabbed hold of a handgun that he'd stashed in one of his cabinets and opened fire on the intruders, hitting each of them and inflicting non-fatal wounds. 2 of the robbers managed to escape from the home and flee the scene in a vehicle after being found by Mobile County deputies at a Dollar General 2 miles away. They were taken into custody, as was the 3rd accomplice, who'd remained wounded at Irving's residence. The suspects, named as Casey Ray Gann, Joseph Heathcock, and Chase Dolaban, all face charges of first-degree robbery, first-degree burglary, and second-degree assault. Thanks for watching. Would you rather try to rob a bank or try to break into the home of a police officer? Let us know in the comments section below.